Welcome to Want to Franchise Your Business? Intro to State and Federal Franchise Laws.
Hello and welcome to Franchising Your Business, Intro to State and Federal Franchise Laws with attorney Tim Pickwell. Tim has had a private law practice representing national and international restaurant, retail, distribution, and fitness studio franchise clients with an emphasis on franchise registration, disclosure, and relationship issues. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Franchising 101, Key Considerations Before Taking the Leap. Tim, great to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
So that we're all on the same page here, what is the legal definition of a franchise in the United States?
The legal definition of a franchise has three elements. They are a trademark, a fee, and then the third element goes by the name ongoing relationship, substantial assistance, or substantial control. But basically, if these three elements are present, the substantial association of the business with the franchisor's trademark or service mark, the trademark element, and a required fee, initial franchise fee, ongoing royalty, it actually can comprise 10 different items that might trigger the fee requirement. And then finally, that last area, substantial assistance or control, site selection, having a supplier list, training, ongoing marketing, a website, those types of things. Those three elements are present, you have a franchise. And sadly, almost like monthly in my business, I deal with what we call the inadvertent or the accidental franchise. And this is someone who maybe bowled ahead without any legal advice or got bad legal advice, and they think they're doing something called a license agreement, and yet all three of those elements are present, and so they trigger the franchise laws. And in the worst case I ever saw, before they got to me, a client found an attorney on the internet, got them to do a license agreement for him, and the license agreement even said in it, this is a license agreement. This is not a franchise agreement. Both parties agree this is not a franchise agreement. Well, the parties had a falling out, and unfortunately for my client, you cannot waive the application of the franchise laws. And even if your contract says this is not a franchise agreement, if those three elements, trademark, fee, that ongoing relationship or marketing plan element are present, then you are a franchise.
Wow. So what happens when in that situation when someone gets in trouble, if you will?
Nothing good, because first of all, you usually find out at the worst possible time when you're in a dispute. Mm-hmm. And your putative licensee goes to an attorney to get some advice. And the attorney says, you know what, I think you're actually a franchisee. Was your franchisor registered? Not to my knowledge. Did they provide you with a franchise disclosure document? No. Did they give you 60 days notice before they terminated you, an opportunity to cure? No, none of those things. So now you've triggered a variety of franchise registration and relationship laws, and the penalty can be criminal sanctions, which is rare. I haven't seen that in quite a while, but definitely civil sanctions, such as you have to rescind the contract and give them all their money back that they've ever paid you. And then depending on what state you're in, you may get state taking legal action against you, some kind of a consent decree, some other problems. So trying to avoid the franchise laws, you'd better be very careful and get some good advice.
Why would someone want to avoid the franchise laws? Is it a financial decision?
Typically, hassle and finances. So as we will discuss, it is not necessarily cheap to become a franchisor. We have a budget, we show, and we say basically it's going to cost you about $200,000 over the first couple of years. Sadly, that doesn't all go to me, but there's marketing, there's improved website, all sorts of compliance issues, but definitely legal fees to produce your franchise documents. You'll want to form a new entity for a variety of reasons. You'll probably want to register your trademark if you haven't already. And then one of the requirements is audited financials each year. And so there's an expense associated with that. And the documents that you are required to use must be updated annually as well. So there's an ongoing legal expense.
Yeah, that sounds. And you mentioned the hassle too. It's a lot of paperwork, a lot of regular work and all that.
Yes, unfortunately, the whole project starts with a lot of paperwork. Gets a little easier after that each year, but definitely compliance costs are not insubstantial.
All right, first lesson for anyone listening, don't do that. So if you meet the definition of a franchise and you want to sell any franchises, what do you need to do to comply with the law?
Interestingly, Congress has never passed a law relating to franchising, but the Federal Trade Commission, through its ability to regulate interstate commerce, in 1979 passed the Federal Trade Commission franchise rule. And this rule requires that you provide a prospective franchisee. It's a pre-sale document, pre-sale disclosure document to each prospective franchisee. And this document has very detailed requirements and disclosures that you must follow. Additionally, there are 14 states that we call registration states where you must register as a franchisor before you can sell franchises. And you also have to provide a franchise disclosure document. And then there's another half a dozen states with varying business opportunity laws that we also have to comply with, although that compliance is fairly straightforward, a one-page form, that type of thing. The biggest issue is that to sell franchises in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, you need a franchise disclosure document. Now, there are exceptions, but they're rather hard to meet. There's two types, the ones that relate to the franchisor. You have to be a very large, experienced franchisor with X number of units and in business for X amount of years before you can dispense with the franchise disclosure document. And the other exemptions are similar to a sophisticated purchaser, sophisticated investor laws, that if a prospective franchisee is deemed large enough and has a significant enough net worth, then they're deemed capable of taking care of themselves and they don't need a disclosure document either. But unfortunately, those 14 states I mentioned, their exemptions don't line up with the federal exemptions. And sometimes complying with both is either impossible or extremely difficult. And a colleague of mine says it's almost as expensive trying to thread the needle and have an exemption strategy as it is to just comply with the law in the first place.
All right. So what are some of the key factors that you'll tell people to consider, that you might coach them on when deciding whether franchising is the right move for their business?
Well, I go over the three elements with them, and I tell them if you eliminate one of those elements, trademark, fee, ongoing relationship, eliminate any one of those three, and you're not a franchise. I've never had anyone want to eliminate the fee. That's a non-starter. I did have one client. She said, I don't care about my brand. This is more of a person-to-person type of activity. I train them. We have an app. So she went on her happy way, not a franchisor. She didn't care if anybody used her trademark or not. But others, they want to grow their brand. They want to collect fees, and they train, have ongoing marketing. They've developed certain expertise, whether it's in search engine optimization or marketing their products and their program. So they meet the definition for a franchise. And so the first thing I talk to them after that conversation is about their trademark. I'm always surprised, but it happens quite a bit. I have two clients right now, and they came to me. They had some clever names for their fitness studios, but they had not looked into registering their names. And when they did, I refer them to very qualified trademark counsel. They found that they couldn't register their name, or there was somebody with it already, or there were so many similar names that it was unlikely to be registered, and it was potentially confusing. So one of the first things they have to do is change their name and try to get a trademark registration. That's the first thing we talk about is what is the state of your trademark and your brand? Had a prospective client came in, had 6 daycare centers, but he had, for some reason, named them all differently, which, to me meant he hadn't grown his brand. So I said, I think.
Yeah, it's one approach, but it's not a brand recognition approach. That's for sure.
Yeah, I said, I think you need to pick one mark and see if you can get it registered and rename all your daycare centers, because it's powerful if you go to market and you've already got 6 successful branded units.
Absolutely. Do people come without having a business yet but want to franchise, or is it typically they've got 1 or 2 and then they want to franchise?
Typically they have 1 or 2 or more. I know a very bright consultant who, God bless him, can sell freezers to Eskimos. He came up with a restaurant concept, and he sold 12 franchises before he'd ever opened the restaurant. Unfortunately, for other reasons, it didn't really pan out. But you don't technically need an existing unit, but of course you have to disclose all of that, and It's very difficult to sell. So people come to me with 1 or 2 units, whether it's fitness studio, small fitness studio, big box gym concept restaurant. Client has successful business with ice cream sandwiches. And they had 1 unit when they came to me. Another client had a couple of dozen stores in San Diego, but they were all owned by family members. And so they went to a different state to franchise and have been quite successful there. To answer your question, you can have none, but I've only seen that happen once. Best to have several, and best to have been in business a few years, because you've learned a lot, you've acquired a lot of know-how, you have hopefully good numbers that we can disclose in the franchise disclosure document, and better to have something that you're in business with. But we try not to use words like proven or tested or successful, because that can lead to other problems.
Yeah, it was interesting that your fitness studio example where they didn't even have their name trademarked and then they had to change it. Seems like something you would do if you're in business, but it looks like they just kind of missed that one.
It's amazing how frequently it happens.
Yeah. So what are some of the common budget related pitfalls that franchise owners face when they first start franchising, and how best can they be avoided?
Taking on too much overhead. Real life example, 2 clients came to me at about the same time. And one was a mature couple, had been successful in business, and they had a very successful cupcake concept and had even won awards on the cooking channel. And I thought they were going to hit a home run. Same time, another client came to me, and she was a kinesiology major from San Diego State. That is, she was a Pilates instructor. Her husband was a Marine fighter pilot. So between the two of them, they did not have a single day in corporate America. And both of these concepts started at roughly the same time. And the couple with no business experience ran everything on a shoestring. In fact, I was their back office. This is in the days of more paper documents, and I would print up franchise agreements for them to sign, put the sign here stickies, give them to my client. She'd come back a few weeks later with a few signed franchise agreements for me to file and apologize because this one was bent or had stains because they signed it in spa or something. But she didn't hire her first employee till she hit about 20, 25 franchises. The other couple, first thing they did was they brought their consultants on board full-time, rented an office space for them at a nearby strip mall. They had some poor selection. Their first franchisees were difficult. Their overhead was substantial. They were paying a salary, rent, and they, after a couple of years, decided they'd rather retire than continue. And I asked them, I said, what went wrong? I thought you guys were going to really do well. And the husband said something interesting. He said, we're experienced business people, but we thought franchising was so unique that we threw out all our business know-how and just listened to consultants. And that was a mistake. The successful clients I see run things on a shoestring till their revenue starts to match some overhead, and then they focus on making. This is really critical. They focus on the relationship and making sure their first half a dozen franchisees share their values, share their goals. They make those first 6 successful, and then those franchisees end up selling your franchise for you.
Definitely. Can you walk us through the key steps of creating a franchise? Where does the budgeting process fit into the timeline, and how does everything sort of go together?
You can dual path a lot of this, but you're technically not supposed to sell or offer to sell franchises until you are registered and until you have a franchise disclosure document in certain states. That's just counterintuitive. Any business person would probably want to go out and do some research and marketing and talk to people, find out there's a desire for their franchise. But that's not the way the laws are written. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to market or sell or offer to sell a franchise until you're registered in California and a dozen of these other states. So the process is we start to create the franchise disclosure document. We have big questionnaires. We walk a client through it, or if they're working with a good consultant, they help. At the same time, your franchisor is required to have 3 years of audited financials. Now, I'm going to say 0 of my clients that walk in the door are prepared to have 3 years of audited financials for their legal entity. It would be expensive, and maybe they don't want to disclose everything about their existing business. So that's why we form a new entity. If you have a new entity, you only have to have opening bank balance audit, starting financials. You don't need 3 years. There's also several other good reasons to form a legal entity, which are to maybe create some legal distance between the mothership and your new concept, or because you might have different investors in the original concept and different investors in the franchisor. So you form a new entity, you start working on the franchise disclosure documents, you contact an auditor, and we help with a lot of these processes. And at the same time, as we go through this process, we ask you questions about your manuals and your training. And sometimes clients, they're prepared to train employees, but they haven't thought about how to train a franchisee in site selection or this type of thing. So it's very much the franchisor is starting to think about things they hadn't thought about before. And so they have to sometimes hit pause and create some manuals because we have to disclose these in the documents. So it's a busy path. And meanwhile, most clients are just trying to still make a living and running their existing concept. So
yeah, sure.
It's a challenge. And which gets to another point. So as they grow, if clients are successful, they reach a point where, they got one foot on the dock of they're running their restaurant or their 3 restaurants or their fitness studio, and they're still teaching classes, and then they're selling franchises. And at some point they have to step off the dock and become a franchisor. And some of my clients franchise and sell off their existing units and do nothing but become a franchisor. Others, find good managers. But at some point, you want to devote yourself pretty full time to being a franchisor because of the ongoing relationship, the marketing, the franchise sales. And the bigger you get, the bigger that task becomes.
As a franchise attorney, do you kind of help business owners set realistic financial goals?
I tell them that I'm not the business consultant, but I sure have seen a lot in 35 years of doing this. And I've had clients tell me they're going to sell 300 franchises in a year or two. I try to explain that's very, very unrealistic. It'd be one of the fastest growing franchises in history.
Move over, McDonald's.
Yeah, and in fact, most franchisors never get to 100. And then I have another client tell me they're going to have 1,000 in 10 years, which was faster than Denny's grew. So try to tamp down their expectations and come up with something realistic. Because like I said, if you can get half a dozen happy franchisees, then the thing might start to snowball. But I also, talk to clients, if you have a real life example, you have one or two successful pizza concepts in the area and you want to grow, you don't have to become Pizza Hut. I know a client who has about 20 and has been stuck there for over a decade, and they're quite happy. And they sell beer now. Their franchisees do well. They do well, just because they're just a good regional brand. And they advertise on television. They advertise at Padre games. You don't have to reach 100 or 1,000 to have a successful franchise business. I mentioned the restaurant chain because so many family members had restaurants in Southern California. It was logistically challenging to try to grow here. So they moved to Nevada, and they have 60 restaurants, and it's a multi-million dollar business for the family. It's been very good for them. They have 60 franchisees and collect rents and collect royalties and have grown their brand. They had a big gala celebration with the governor of the state there. So, you don't have to reach 100. You don't have to reach 1,000 to have a very successful franchise business.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us on Franchising Your Business, Intro to State and Federal Franchise Laws with attorney Tim Pickwell. To connect with Tim, visit pickwelllaw.com and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. We love having you be part of our community. Tim, so great to have you here. Looking forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.